Hi, everyone. My name is Andrea Cash. I help the League of Women Voters of North Carolina with their communications. I am joined today by Jennifer Bremer. She is on the board of the League of Women Voters of North Carolina. She is also an expert on redistricting and gerrymandering, and that is what we're going to talk about today. This is our fourth in a series of videos on this topic, which is very relevant in 2021, a redistricting year. So Jennifer, thank you for being here. Building on what we've already talked about, we know that the best way to end gerrymandering is to have voters, not politicians, draw the maps, but that's going to be tough to get done in time for this year's redistricting. Does that mean that we are stuck with more gerrymandering for now?
We're not going to be able to get rid of all of the gerrymandering, but in fact, even maps that are drawn by citizen commissions, which are the best system, even they have been accused of having some gerrymandering sneak into that. But we hope to get rid of the worst of the worst of the gerrymandering, and we have really two ways to do that, and one is that we now have experience that the North Carolina courts will throw out a map that is extreme partisan gerrymandering, not something that has some safe districts here and a few safe there, but has a lot of competitive districts in the middle, but something where it really has been done to an extreme degree. And we also have better tools for measuring that, which I won't go into because those are really wonky. But if Monte Carlo simulation is something that you're interested in, that's how it's being done. But if you're not interested, don't worry about it. So we now have better techniques to measure and techniques that the courts have found to be very convincing. So that gives us some tools that we haven't had in the past. And North Carolina, like other states, many other states, does have a free elections clause in the Constitution and in our Bill of Rights, which is, you should really read it if you haven't read the North Carolina Constitution, especially the Bill of Rights. It's very impressive. It gives us a lot of rights that we need to safeguard. So that's one thing we have, is that the courts will stand up. The other thing is that we really need citizens to be involved. Gerrymandering affects you in many different ways. I've been talking mostly in the previous videos about how it affects our democracy by undermining accountability, because politicians of both parties are in safe seats and you can't vote them out. And if you can't vote them out, they're not accountable. And that leads inevitably to representation that is not as good as if you can hold them accountable and they know that. But the other thing that it does is that it makes it much more difficult to solve all of the problems that face our state, face any state. How do we get better education? How do we preserve our environment? How do we attract jobs? How do we get taxes that are fair yet generate the revenues that our government needs to operate? How do we deal with COVID? How do we deal with the challenges in the rural areas in particular? And because you have these two armed camps, you can't agree on those sensible middle solutions that we really need to get to. So that's why it's really so important, and why even if your issue is environment or education or job creation or whatever it is, why gerrymandering should really be something that you pay attention to, and that means paying attention to this redistricting, and also to trying to help us get reform so that the voice of the voters can really be heard. And the reform is going to be a partial reform this year, probably a reform that leaves the legislature drawing the maps and approving the maps, and also leaves county commissions and so forth drawing their own maps, city councils. But hopefully it'll be one that sets some rules and some boundaries around that, so that they can't just draw whatever they want, because the court is there and the court is going to be watching. And that means that they will hopefully do it in a more transparent process. They made some progress on that. Really must be recognized. The court said do it more transparently, and in many ways they did. But it was also very evident that some of them were talking off microphone. Again, the league was in the room watching them. There were little groups of people clustered around the leadership obviously cutting some kind of deal. And there were people coming and going in and out of the room carrying maps. And we don't know who they were talking to when they went out of the room. So there was still a lot of finagling going on. But we can hope that we can get a process legislation that would set clear criteria. They must be compact districts that can't be all scraggly and so forth, and that will mandate a more open and transparent process where the voter's voice can really be heard.
So ultimately, we need an open, transparent process, as you said, not a map drawn in some consultant's basement. And we need clear criteria to make sure the map is drawn at least in a reasonably fair way. What else do we need?
Well, we also need people to pay attention to this process more than anything. I mean, as I'm trying to make the case here, this really does affect you. And it affects not only our democracy, which is obviously important in and of itself, but it also affects how every decision that matters is made at the state level and indeed at the county level and the city level. So it really, we're not going to get change, and we're not even going to get a really good process just on the basis of legislation alone, because even the best of laws in this area are difficult to really make that specific, such that there's only one way they can draw the maps, which is a fair way. And therefore, the involvement of citizens in paying attention and participating in the process, making your opinions heard, asking questions, that's really an essential part of the process.
Well, and citizen participation, of course, is a favorite of the League of Women Voters of North Carolina. We need an open process, clear criteria, citizen participation. How do we get all this?
Well, it really comes down to, to making your opinion heard, and communications with legislators are far more effective if they come from their own constituents. And as you will have noticed, there's always one party in charge. It may have been a 50-50 legislature, but I don't know of one here. But the party in charge calls the shots, and that's true whichever party is in charge. So we really need people, as I mentioned before, not only does the party in charge, whichever party it is, has tended to favor gerrymandering, and the party out of control has been the one that has been arguing for reform. And you can go back and see bills that were introduced when they were not in control, by the legislators who are now the leaders, that look exactly, word for word, some of the bills that have been put forward now by the other side, because that's the dynamic. And obviously that's not a dynamic that leads to bills getting passed if only the party that's in the minority favors reform. So we really need for voters who are unaffiliated, and as well as who are in the same party as the majority, to make their voices heard and to ask for a fair and open process. Not asking this year, there will be bills introduced that would create a citizens commission, but the chance of that being adopted is extremely slim. In fact, no legislature has ever adopted an independent commission unless they were facing a rapidly moving referendum drive that was going to put something on the ballot. And we can't do that. But we have seen reforms adopted, as I mentioned, in Virginia, and also in New York in 2014, where a legislature that was not facing a referendum because their citizens couldn't do it, but that legislature still adopted reform. So it is possible. But with the redistricting staring us right in the face, we think we can get a limited reform that really will lead to a fairer process. But to do that, we need to bring pressure on the legislators from their own voters, whether that's a phone call, whether that's cards and letters, whatever form that makes, asking them to come and speak to you, whatever it is that you think you can do to help get the line across that, so that you want your vote to count, and you want a fair process, and you want accountability for all the legislators. So that's what we really need to happen, and hope that, you know, we can get enough pressure built up so that they will make this kind of a reform. It's possible that the court will mandate it, and we also have the court standing back there saying, okay, you know, we made you redraw both the congressional and legislative, you know, we'll do that again. So that's additional pressure on them, and I think that will also, together with citizen pressure, will help in, you know, getting a reform.
Yeah. So just to emphasize, we really need people to get involved, reach out to their legislators, and stay informed. And I want to mention, you know, fairdistrictsnc.org. You have great webinars on Zoom every month addressing redistricting. Folks should follow you on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube. Go to the League of Women Voters of North Carolina website to stay up to date. Get on our email list. If you can donate money so that we can do more work in this area, that would be fantastic. I think that's it for today. Get involved, be an informed citizen, and help us get some kind of redistricting reform this year. So thank you, Jennifer. Thanks everyone for watching. Bye.